Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammers so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the Dickenverse this episode are...
Hey, I'm Paul, and I've been reading so many iBooks, I've been getting scales over my eyes.
And I'm Will. I'm asking you all to wake me up because we have some questions to see what brings Evan to life and figure out what is Evan's essence.
Okay. I'm Aaron, and I'm between the host of The Path to Story and the author of the novella Path to Glory. I feel like I'm Path to Maury over here. I don't know if most people are going to get that because Maury may not be a show that translates across the oceans. But anyways, in this episode, we're chatting with Black Library author Evan Dicken about all things Warhammer, Black Library, and how far along he is on the path to glory. Hey, Evan, thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here. I'm excited to chat with you all.
Hey, likewise. You see, everyone, Maury is it like a talk show where like
No, you got it wrong. Because it's Monday, but it's supposed to be Tuesdays with Maury.
Oh, well, okay. I mean, I suppose that's true. You can't correct my pun. So here we are doing another Black Library author interview. Everybody seemed to like the first one enough. And I doubt it had anything to do with us. So we figured we'd keep them coming and chat with our new friend, Evan Dicken today. Find out more about him. Find out more about what he's been working on and what he has come out most recently. And as always, we had some questions that you folks wanted us to ask him, and we would be remiss if we did not do so. So I'll first say, hey, Paul and Will, is there anything you guys want to bring up or chat about before we dive right in? Because I don't have a good preamble for any of this.
So we're going to be talking about a couple of different things right now, but I do genuinely have a question about iBooks, which is IBUQ, and also the Demi-Dragoths. So like you, Evan, have a thing about lizards being mounts for humans. And I kind of want to know why, or if like there's anything behind that. So that's all.
It was, I think it's an outgrowth of when I started writing for Age of Sigmar. It was back, in the days when they wanted to make everything real weird. So I was putting everybody on horses, and my editor at the time, Lottie, was like, no horses, weird stuff. We want lizards, we want bugs, we want like strange things. I'm like, fine, I can do strange stuff. So yeah, that's basically the outgrowth of that. So I just kind of came up with my own mounts, and now we're getting sort of the opposite thing. So I putting people on lizards and stuff, and they say, no, horses now. So
it's awesome.
So it's the era of the horse, I should say.
That makes this interview all the worth it. Honestly, we could stop right there. That was enough for me. That was a good question. Right on. All right. So because I don't know I have a smooth way to transition to this, I'm going to dive right in if you guys will indulge me a little bit. But Evan, let's start with you. We'll start with what the folks most want to know about is the man behind the legend. And so let's start at the beginning. I'd love to know how you got your start in Warhammer as a whole, not even necessarily authorship, if that's a word, but just really the Warhammer hobby in the first place. I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. I think the first tangentially Warhammer thing I can remember doing is my father bought us a Hero Quest one day for Christmas. Ooh. And it was, ancient times. So I don't know, 6 or 7. So we played through all of that. And then that sort of transitioned into Battle Masters, which is sort of like Warhammer Light for like 90s kids. And that was at the same time. I remember being at my local hobby store, and Games Workshop had put out these little green pamphlets, and each of them had like a little army description and like a sample army with points and stuff. And I remember taking probably an armload of those home with me and just spending, I want to say, days pouring through those and coming up with sample armies and just kind of like figuring out, because they wouldn't tell you how much like a skeleton was worth. They would just give you the like 32 skeletons, 172 points. So I'm like, okay, well, here's what they've got. So I'm trying to like reverse engineer what a skeleton costs and like rebuild it from the ground up. And I remember irritating my friends with all that sort of stuff. And so from that point on, basically all my allowance went to little tiny elves. And that was that.
Much like my salary, allowance, salary, same deal. Yeah. Did you stick with, have you then stuck with Warhammer since then? Or did you sort of ebb and flow? Like, I think a lot of people have stories where they kind of fall in and out of it. Was it something that's been sort of a lifelong connection, or did you have to set it down at one point?
Yes and no. I was really into playing like the actual tabletop games in high school, but since then I've had sort of less time to do that. And I've always been like a role player, like to the core. So sure. I would say that I'm sort of embarrassed to say I've never played Age of Sigmar, but I have played. I have played the RPG a bunch, and I have played like the Warhammer Quest stuff, and Rogue Trader and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Dark Heresy, the new one that is coming out from Cubicle 7. I've got that on pre-order. So I would say I do play a lot of Games Workshop stuff, but not necessarily tabletop things. I love getting the figures. I love painting them. I love arranging them on little tables. But when like the rubber meets the road, I can just never seem to find time to actually like play a game.
Sure. I was incredulous when you said, "Oh, I hadn't played a game of Age of Sigmar," as if I had played any more than maybe what I can count on one hand. Like, oh, how dare he? Yeah.
You got your yearly Game of War cry in.
I did.
That's it.
I can check it out.
My brother did get me I think under the bed here, a big box of something. I think it's Shadespire or something. I haven't looked at it yet, but I'm going to unpack it. He got it for Christmas, so I need to break it out and start putting the miniatures together.
Nice. Very cool. Those are great.
I have young children at home, so I'm trying to. I just started them on Hero Quest, so I'm hoping they'll follow the same path that I do.
Nice.
The new. I think Hasbro put out a new edition of Hero Quest last year.
Yeah.
You're braver than I am.
I can't use the words like chaos or anything, so I think it's like a dredge or something. I don't remember what it's called.
Gotcha.
So I did have one other question. On your author bio at the end of your novels, it says that you have a warband of unpainted Chaos Warriors. Do you still have an unpainted warband of Chaos Warriors?
Yeah. They're still in the sprues even. They're lurking down in the basement. I think they're from 3 editions ago.
Are they the hunchback ones? In like the light gray plastic? Or are they the straight back ones with the clocks?
Straight backs. Yeah, they're
all right,
straight
so Storm
backs.
of Chaos. Cool. All right. Just wondering. I've collected most of them, and I have them up in my closet. So cool.
Paul's got a timeline running in his head now.
Yeah, right.
That's great.
I was going to say, you mentioned before that you started collecting little plastic elves, and we're talking about your book that includes 2 different types of elves. Are you an elf fan through and through, or do you kind of dip in and out?
I'd say elves are probably in my top 3 factions of all time. But So I think my first army was High Elves for fantasy back in the day. And I've got the Lumineth. Here's the thing. I bought a couple of Lumineth models, but they're too pretty. Like I put them all together and I'm like, these are too, if I put paint on them, I'm going to ruin them.
Yeah.
So like I don't want to do something, I don't want to destroy something beautiful. So
you inadvertently paint judgy faces on them and you're like, why do you look at me like this? Yeah.
So they're assembled. They just, I haven't put a brush to plastic yet.
Yeah, fair enough.
For sure.
Nice.
All right. Well, then I'll ask if we're talking about beginnings and starting stuff. I'd love to hear then how and I guess when did you transition over to Black Library and what was that process like for you? How did you join up and how did you get involved?
So it's not really a long story, but so I've been writing for a while. I think since the early aughts, and had published publications. And I started writing science fiction, and then I transitioned to horror, and then I had gone into fantasy, to get the trifecta.
Sure.
And I think, and one of the editors at the time, Lottie Llewellyn-Wells, just emailed me out of the blue. I was just about to shut down my website. I'm like, I'm so tired of paying hosting fees. I just want to shut my website down. And probably a day before I did that, she emailed me, and I thought it was a scam at first. I'm like, I don't know how you think you're going to get money out of me. But I'm not paying you to be like a Black Library author.
Yeah.
And I went and looked her up on the site, and she was a real person. And I'm like, oh, so I don't know what to do with this. So basically I started working together. I still think, someday they're going to try and get money out of me. Like, I don't know.
There's a long con. Nigerian prince comes knocking on your door. Yeah.
I've written all these really great stories, but I've still got imposter syndrome is what I'm hearing.
The thing is, they've already got my money. Like I already hand them, hundreds of dollars for these war bands and things.
Yeah.
It's not like they can get any more out of me.
Yeah. Blood from a stone for sure.
Breaking even here.
Yeah. So she emailed you. How was that onboarding process like? Or was it smooth? I imagine it was smooth.
It was good because Lottie is a great editor, and she and I worked really well together. So she was incredibly friendly and sort of helpful. And I got to write. I think my first was Path to Glory, which I think you all reviewed back in the day. That's what got me onto your podcast, because being a narcissist, I wanted to hear if my stuff was good or not.
I would have done the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys seem to enjoy it. So I started listening to your podcast, obviously, because you seem like you have really good taste.
Great taste.
And so that was sort of my farewell to the world that was, because it's about a bunch of people who get sort of cut off and forgotten. And the transition from old Warhammer to Age of Sigmar happened right when I had my first child. So I kind of have a 3-year just blur. And I felt like okay, high elves, time to say goodbye. I'm having a baby now. And then 3 years later, I'm like, wait, what happened to elves? What's going on? Like, I felt like the world had totally changed in more ways than one. So, but yeah, it was a really smooth onboarding process. I had a really good time writing. She gave me a lot of freedom, which I think is good and bad at the same time. I got to write about, she says, well, what do you want to write about? And I said, well, obviously this. I want to write about dirty humans, which are my favorite faction. Like
I've noticed. Yeah.
Age of Sigmar. I like them. I don't know, being a human, I kind of identify with them.
Sure. Yeah. Fancy that. Who'd have thought? Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Guys, keep them coming. You got more questions you want to ask?
So you like the dirty human faction, and Path to Glory is a really good example of, like you said, transitioning from the old world to AOS. But what was the first short story you wrote when you were like, okay, I feel like I've got a handle on AOS, and I feel like this is my AOS story, if that makes sense, as opposed to a transition?
Oh, man.
Because I was reading one of your stories, and you were talking about Myrmidia, who was a god from the old world. And so I had picked up a little bit of all right, we've got Knights of Myrmidia going on, which is a bit of an old world callback. So
I would probably say it would have to be Red Hours, because I had to sort of get rid of all, because there's still, there's an elf in it, but, it's a dispossessed elf. And there's it had all the old trappings in it, but it was a new story set in a new world. And it was the first time I had to sort of come to grips with one of the things I enjoy about Age of Sigmar is the realms being sort of characters themselves. A story set on Shaman is going to be completely different than a story set on Shaiish. The same story with the same characters.
Yeah.
And that's where I really I really realized oh, hey, there's so much more to play with. And don't get me wrong, my heart will always belong to the world that was. I want to grow up an outdoor for, visit, the Ulthuan and things like that. But just seeing the sheer scope of the Mortal Realms and what you could play with as an author and what you could bring in, I think Van Wyn said it best in the interview, Mortal Realms are just weird. They're just weird. And I really enjoy that aspect of it. So I think that's where it finally clicked for me, hey, I can do this sort of weird stuff with these people, even if they're, left over from sort of the world that was.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Red Hours. It's a very visceral, novel or short story, I should say, to read, because of the way that you describe the realms, right? You were chunks of rust are coming down and bodies are being flensed from inside. So I really got that you were this is AOS, and that felt completely AOS to me. And then you have the Stormcast come down, and then it was really cool. So that makes sense based on how I read it as well. So
thank you very much.
I'm hearing two things that you like that I think relate to the near future, which is to say, one, you like dirty humans, and two, you like the old world. So I don't know which one to go first, but are you excited at all then about the Cities of Sigmar release coming up?
I am very excited, and I really can't speak to what I'll be. I have done some ancillary projects related to that, so I'm incredibly excited about that. As you can see, I'm probably already glowing now. I get to finally let me write about more people, so I can't really speak to who and what, but so I'm beyond excited. And one of the coolest things about writing for Games Workshop is I get to see all the stuff before they release it.
Yeah, true.
So I've got these battle tomes that aren't publicly available yet, and they're still missing big chunks, and parts of them are some of the art's gone or just sketch line drawings. But this is incredibly cool. I get to do this for my job. There's nothing better than this.
I'm just imagining you flipping through and realizing that everyone's riding horses and no one's on a lizard. Oh no, going back and re-editing notes.
I had to. I actually, in the most recent project I was on, I put somebody, I think, on a demigryph or a lizard or a mantis or something, and the editor said, no, horse. Of course it is.
You gotta rein it in. What?
Oh,
that's silly. Downright silly. Go ahead.
So Will and I were actually recording last night, and we were having a discussion about the new Cities of Sigmar release. And this is kind of a general question of my feeling on the release is that we're finally getting humans for Age of Sigmar, because so much of the model range is kind of a holdover from the old world. So is that something that you feel as well, having now been able to immerse yourself in that a little bit?
I think so. Yes. I can't really speak to what they'll be like, but they're going to be people that aren't just the old models, I think. Yeah.
Nice.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Then second question, it seems like you're into the old world. Are you also jazzed about the old world coming back, whenever that is? Who knows?
Yeah, believe me, I'm already pestering my editors about it. Please, are you going to write any fiction? If so, can I write some? So yeah,
That was my follow-up question. Yeah. So
right.
I think I'm really excited about like the time period that it's set in and the different like political factions, especially the Empire. Obviously, is one of my favorite factions. So it's fun to see that sort of like this ramp up to like a civil war that may or may not be happening, depending on how they mess with the timeline. I haven't really seen anything that they've released yet, or that it's not in the IP Bible or anything. So your guess is as good as mine.
right on.
Nice.
I'm a little later to Warhammer Fantasy. I was around during 8th, but not for long. But I have been collecting. Speaking of Warhammer RPG, so I've been collecting all the Warhammer Fantasy RPG, the current edition. Now I haven't cracking them or reading them, just to have in case, like, if I'm really going to dive into it, I need to preemptively like have this library built up. So I'm right there with you.
So I had a question actually that Aaron reminded me. So you've said you've done role playing. So number one, are you a player or are you a GM? Are you both? And number two, does that inform your fiction?
Well, okay, I'll answer them in order. Yes, I've done a ton of role playing. I role played, I think, yesterday. And I am almost always a GM because the things that make me a bad player make me a great GM because I'm a talker. I steal scenes, and I'm aware of this, so I try and cut it back. And I have to be entertained at all times. But the thing is, a player talking all the time is kind of irritating. But like a GM, you got to be on the ball. You got to talk, and I like the world building. I like the creating, just the scenarios and writing everything out. So yeah, definitely a GM.
And then how does that inform your writing, or does it inform your writing?
Oh, it very much does, because they're sort of my like test subjects. I spit out ideas sort of at them, and I sort of work through it. And it's like a focus group almost, because they know me very well, and I know them very well. So I'm writing, and tons of stuff from the game has sort of like worked, like little Easter eggs from our game. Not that they read my stuff, but the little Easter eggs and characters from the game sort of have worked their way in, because it's I get to put people in situations and see how they react as characters, and that certainly informs how I write characters too.
So Shriekstone, since you like elves and you like dirty humans, is that a bit of a real role-playing experience for you? Like, how did you transition into writing from the perspective of a grot? Because I read that one and I was just like, okay, this is the most grot thing that we've had in AOS so far. So yeah.
And that's high praise. So there you go.
Yes, first off, thank you so much. That was, I think, my favorite story I've ever written for Age of Sigmar.
Oh, nice.
It was just so much fun. I don't know if I could sustain that for like a novel or anything, but it was a lot of fun to just sort of get into the mind of a grot. And I talked about my top 3 favorite factions, and it's going to be like Cities of Sigmar, Lumineth, and then probably Gloomspite,
Nice.
because I just love those little weird guys, like those. Those weird little freaks, man. I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for goblins. I think when I played 40K, I collected orcs and goblins. This is back in the previous editions. And I just tried to field as many of those little guys as I could. So I'd roll up and put out 400 minis on the table, and they're all grots and stuff. So they get mowed down, but it's just fun to have them there. They got some panache.
Sure. Back to the role playing. Did you ever get a chance to work with Cubicle 7 at all in any of their materials that they put out? I don't know if you guys had connected at all. Okay. Well, you should. I don't know who you got to call. I don't have any connections or anything, but like I'll put it out there in the world.
Well, I was at Origins Game Fair in Columbus maybe a month ago, and I just probably dropped $300 on their new editions. So I guess I don't want to say they owe me, but
you'll get a little credit in the next book.
Sure.
It's less of a question, but just talking about being a GM and an author, I'm just imagining, is there a scenario, because you mentioned you use them as their testers, do you bring characters to them, like introduce them to, say, a character that you might use later on in a book or anything, or is it more of scenario testing?
More. They come up with their own characters, and I steal bits and pieces from them, like shamelessly. I steal from them. It's fun because we're a very idiosyncratic group, so it's not just I'll come up with the scenarios and things, but they play not only their characters, but they play probably, I want to say 80% of the NPCs as well.
Oh, okay.
So and they're enemies, and they so I'm more of a producer than a like director role. Okay. I just try and keep everything sort of moving in one direction. But it's really fun because in a normal game, like the GM is sort of the arbiter, and the players can get mad at you for screwing them over. But I found that players are the best. If you're doing it to yourself, like there's nothing there's no anger towards me.
Yeah, right.
Obviously, I'm the good guy. I'm trying to help you out here.
Yep.
Do you have them all sign waivers that you can steal stuff for your books?
This is not your IP.
They're happy that I take stuff, I think.
Perfect.
TM. When we role play, I play with a lot of other GMs as well, and so I find myself being like, all right, guys, I don't know how this works, so we're going to take a poll across all of you. How would each of you do it in your game? And then, like, again, to your point, they don't get mad at me. Like, they come to a consensus, and then I wash my hands of the whole thing.
Very
jokes on you guys.
So, based on the way you're talking about the way you run your role-playing game, leads me to the question of, are you a plotter or a pantser? Because from the way that you're talking, it almost seems like you run your games as a pantser, and you let your role players kind of make the story move forward. But then it kind of sounds like a bit different when you're like, I'm a producer. So
I am a plotter, more or less. Yeah, you kind of have to be with Black Library because they want you to have a pitch and then a synopsis and then an extended synopsis. So by the time you actually like sit down to write the novel or the short story or something, you've probably run it through 3 or 4 editors, and they've gotten feedback from the whole gamut of people. And it's all in service of sharpening up your prose and making sure your stories. I mean, they want the best for you, and they I'm a big believer in the editorial process, so I try to take criticism, in the spirit which it's offered, and I think my work has come out much stronger for it. Not that I've sometimes you got to hold the line.
Right.
Paul, I am flabbergasted every time you ask someone that question, and then they know what you're talking about, because to this day I still don't get it, and don't explain it to me because I don't want to know. But everybody seems to take it in stride, and they know exactly what you're getting at when you ask. So kudos to you. I think maybe we can put a pin in talking about Evan for a hot second. We'll definitely do so eventually, but maybe we pause and we get to talking about Children of Techless just to say we did, and then we can ask more questions sort of after the fact, if that's okay with everybody. Any objections?
Nope, because all the questions I have are in that section that comes after the book. So,
oh, even better. All right. So, I feel like I was interested in just asking a series of W questions, like I do in some of my other shows. But if somebody wants to ask the W questions instead of me, because I'm talking a lot, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. So, I'll take the first W question, which is: so when does this book take place? I mean, I've read it, so I kind of have an understanding, but for the listeners at home who may not have yet, how would you describe it to them?
I would say definitely after the Necroquake, but sort of like I'm thinking like the early stages of like the Arcane Optimar, because their magic, like the increasing level of magic does play a role in the book, but I don't really refer to it as such. So probably in that sort of nebulous like space between those two.
Yeah. And then how did this story like come to be? Like, where did this like idea come from? Because you mentioned you have to come up with the pitch. So what kind of created this idea for you?
Well, I should walk that back a little bit. Sometimes you just, it depends on the editor and the project, but sometimes they'll say, we want a story about, Seraphon. Or, and this time my editor Jacob Youngs came to me and said, we want a story about Lumineth and Ideneth, and that's sort of so you have to write something about that, and we're going to call it Children of Techless, and so we wanted to sort of like bring this interplay between the two, elven species races, and sort of play on that they're, sort of siblings and fighting, but also, they don't, and give some more different perspectives of the same sort of elven experience, I guess. And so I just came up with a half a dozen pitches for that, and then he cut and pasted them all together into something that resembled a plot.
Well, just as an aside, but like I'd love to know how they determine what they want. Like, how did they know that they wanted that thing, and why now? I'm curious. I mean, it's probably a question for them, really. But there's not tied to really elf releases right now. So like, what made them think of this today? I wonder. Like, do they have a list of things like that? I'm not sure.
Well, sometimes you'll write something and it'll come out relatively quickly, and sometimes, like this book, I think I wrote a year ago. So it's just I mean they tell you when it's coming out, obviously, but like the release schedule is sort of opaque to me, and the reasoning behind it. But then again, it's not really my They know this business way better than I do, so I'm not going to try and second guess them.
Sure. You just write words good as you type them. But keep them coming, Will, if you'd like.
Yeah. Next is, where does this book take place? Where do we find our characters?
In Shaiish. I kind of went off the map because I had a really cool idea for a setting thing. So I don't think it's near the Dwindle Sea. Okay. So and then I kind of went from there.
And you kind of mentioned a bit of who in terms of factions, but who specifically does the book kind of follow?
Specifically the Lumineth and the Ideneth, with a little sprinkling of like Ossiarch Bone Reapers in there just to keep everything flowing.
Yeah.
And sort of like as a misdirect on who you think the villain's going to be.
I don't often think of OBR as keeping things flowing, but I get your point, though. Yeah, they're not really go with the flow kind of guys. Sure.
And then tell us a little bit about the main character, Elarin. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah, Elarin. That's how I pronounce it. The reader, Amy Roxon, she pronounced it that way too. So justified. She is a lore seeker who is sort of from a, I want to say, disadvantaged background among the Lumineth. They're not all realm lords, right? They're, some of them have to be sailors, some of them have to be pot makers and whatnot. But she was a scholar at an arcane academy, basically, and not taught in the ways of the lore seeker or anything like that. So she sort of just was going to be a graduate student, basically a professional scholar for the rest of her life in this place. And it got kind of, and then the necroquake happened and threw everything into turmoil, and she found herself sort of, wanting to not avenge, but at least make sure that some things like that didn't happen again to other people. Yeah. And that sort of got her onto the lore seeker path. And now she found herself in Shaiish fighting, Ossiarchs.
Got it. Yeah. You mentioned grad student. There is a small section in the book where they describe the Lumineth equivalent of a thesis defense. And I just love that. Like, of course, the Lumineth are going to go hard on something like that compared to us.
Yeah.
I am not I might have been working out some trauma there. I don't mean.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you work at Ohio State University, according to your bio. Is that still true?
Yeah, I'm a historian. Yeah.
So is there some personal experience that's being translated into this?
No,
Okay.
Absolutely not. No. I didn't, take off all my clothes and sit in the shower and shake and cry after my thesis defense. Did not do that. Definitely not. Did not order a whole bucket of like Kentucky Fried Chicken and just eat it right in the shower. Did not do that. That's not me.
Sounds delicious. Well, it sounded like you had more questions, so you can keep going if you like.
So you had mentioned like Elarin's background kind of coming from like being disadvantaged and being like a little bit different from some of the Lumineth we see. One thing I noticed in reading the book and on the cover is that Elarin does have like a darker skin tone than we see of like your classic high elves. And I think that's great for like bringing in more diversity to the realms. What kind of was like the decision between like for you of expanding that in universe?
Well, I can't really claim total credit for that. That was something actually Jacob suggested, my editor. He said, we should make her a person of color. And I'm like, yeah, that's really great. I didn't even think that was I was really excited to do that. And I think that it was, a good choice. And I think that, diversifying everything, because the mortal realms are vast, right?
Right.
Let's be honest. If we're talking like the realm of light, like it makes sense that there are dark-skinned people there because it's full of light, right? Like you're gonna have a tan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that actually, I'm switching again a little bit, but so that reminds me of the short story you wrote, Harrow Hand. That's basically, is it a prequel for the Neve Black Talon series? Is it intended to be that? And you've got a person of color also as one of the main characters that you represent there as well. So how was that process of you, at this point, I assume you knew that there was an animated series coming and you had some access to the background. So how do you write yourself into the background of something that has yet to be released?
That was, they gave me like a 20-page document that, so they gave me the scripts for all the episodes and everything like that. So I got to spend a week, just becoming these characters. This is one of the situations where you get these characters whole cloth and you just kind of have to inhabit them and make them your own. Because there are going to be other authors writing about the Black Talons, and there already are, I think. I don't know how many stories they've got in the pipeline. So I think the intention was to have authors write from the perspective of each of the Black Talons, just to give readers an insight and people who see the series and want to, delve deeper into their personalities and whatnot. So it was really fun. I think it was really fun to work inside the box, and it's a weird thing to say, but where you're given, this is what we want. This is what we want. These are all the characters. But I was also given free reign to sort of come up with the plot and the interplay and like what themes to touch on in their relationships. And I think one of the things I enjoy most about writing is the character work, where I'm trying to, bounce these personalities off each other and create friction and, release and things like that. So it was a lot of fun to do that with characters that really weren't my own to begin with. So I liked that.
A follow-up to that actually is, for the Broken Realm series, you wrote the short story Archmage, which has Teclis, the biggest of elves. And was that kind of like a similar process? I want, like, how different is it from like named mortal or Stormcast characters versus a named god-like character in terms of writing?
Well, Teclis is really the only god I've had the chance to mess with. And I tried to not to touch him at all as much as I could. Like he's got a very, Teclis is Teclis, right? He should be writing about me.
He might be, for all we know. Yeah.
I'm afraid he's going to appear in a smear of light and just cut me down, which, he'd be totally justified in. I tried to do him, credit, but I wanted to sort of show the, sort of divine arithmetic that goes on in the head of a being that thinks in centuries and sort of stands above it, like a sort of theme in all the gods, good or bad, in the Warhammer universe seems to be like we have to sacrifice for the greater good, sort of thing. I don't want to steal a line from the Tau, but like it they're just trying to survive, right, as a species, I suppose. So it was fun to sort of try to look at Teclis through the eyes of somebody who worships him sort of as a god and respects him, and then sort of turn that on its head, like, hey, part of worship is sacrifice, so you're gonna have to deal with this, buddy.
And then some of the last of our W questions for Children of Teclis is, when you were like getting ready to write this, were there any like specific sources of inspiration or specific other things that you read to prepare yourself for writing this book?
Other than like the various the faction books and army and battle tomes and things, I sort of delved into there quite a bit. I'm always sort of, just reading more or less, passively. So I can't really think of anything that I specifically sort of dove in for Children of Teclis. I was reading, I think, a bunch of Roman history at the time. So I think that the sort of Roman, like generals and legates and things, just the arrogance of Rome provided sort of a perfect sort of backdrop and counterpoint for sort of the Lumineth. Like, hey, we're here to help you and civilize you, but it's not going to be fun for you. This isn't going to be a good process, but you're going to end up better, I promise.
Right.
It's fun.
And I have a follow-up question. Aaron always really likes it when characters travel from one story to another or have connections.
Yeah, I do.
And I know that a lot of the characters that you have in your short stories, etc., tend to be female. So I'm wondering if any of them are intended to be like, oh, they died in this book, but they're coming back in this book, or something like that. Or, for you, it kind of seems to be the Atlantic Empire, but I'm not sure if I missed any like other little nuggets.
I do love the Atlantic Empire. That one of the things I think an earlier editor told me is they want because the mortal realms are so vast, they don't like to have a lot of connection like that, and it might be not the case now.
That's what I think about this. Yeah,
I wholeheartedly agree. Like, I want to make like a little Dicken verse and carve it out of myself, but I think that's exactly what they don't want, right?
So, right.
They let Horse do it. Why won't they let you do it? Yeah, jeez.
I try and throw in little Easter eggs, and not like my the character, I think Byron from Red Hours. He comes back. He's mentioned sort of offhandedly as a like a Lord Militant or something like that at one point in another novel. But they're just small things. I don't think I've had the chance to tie anything in really sort of directly at this.
I'm telling you, man, fight the power. Like, leave little like Easter eggs there, and we will find them.
I'm telling you. I think that it may have changed the policy on that. So, well, I'll test the waters for you.
I had another question. Back to Alarin, actually. And this is a new thing that I want to introduce because I'm also very self-absorbed and not like having what's the word I'm looking for? Not unique, but the point is I would love if you could give us a factoid about Alarin that isn't in the book, that readers can or listeners can only find out about Alarin here. Our own private secret about this character. that's now going to be canon because you'll say it out loud because you're the author and you get to decide?
Yeah. Wow. I had never really thought of that. She probably, she's probably a note taker.
Okay.
Probably writes everything down.
Sure.
So sort of meticulously taking notes. I know her personality seems kind of scattershot, but she's in a period of particular stress, I think, during the novel.
Right. Yeah.
So she would definitely be a plotter. I guess would be my.
There you go, bringing it back around. So one day when there's a Wikipedia article about her, they have to cite this episode then if they want to include that fact to it about her.
So I do have a follow-up question to that, which is, do these characters live in your head? Or do these characters kind of live off to the side? Like, are they still moving, breathing, even though you're done writing at this point?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they'll always, I don't want to say, it sounds kind of trite to say that they'll always be with me, but like they'll be with me in some form or another because I'm going to, chop them up and cannibalize them for pieces, in some future novel, right. Personality traits and stuff like, oh, I really like how that worked out. So I'm going to try and like hit on that, but, problematize it or switch it up a little bit this time. And she was a really fun character to write.
Yeah. Kind of a segue question to the next section, which is, I'm correct in saying that this is your first like actual novel with Black Library, right? What was that process of moving up from short stories and novellas to actually going into your first novel?
It was a lot because I'd only written one novel, I think, before this, and it will never see the light of day. So, so it was interesting. And this was my first novel that actually got through the pitching process because nice. I've gotten to basically almost green light with I think 2 or 3 other novels before that. So I was familiar with like the synopsis, long synopsis, chapter summaries, things like that. And I was just kind of, I'm like, okay, well, this one's not going to go anywhere either. And then finally like, okay, you got the green light, buddy, go ahead. So I was very surprised. I hadn't really thought that I was going to write it while I was coming up with everything. Like, okay, here we go again. But yeah, it was an experience because, when they say, we want 90,000 words in theory is very different than 90,000 words on paper. And because it's actually going to be more like 110,000 words because you got to cut out about 20% of it.
Right.
Give it time to breathe and whatnot. And all the extra plot threads that you put in and like, oh no, this is worthless. Take this out. So, so yeah, it was a lot.
Did they, so actually this is a question from our listener. Let's finally get to a listener question, you guys. We've been waiting and sitting on our hands this whole time.
I'm really happy that your listeners had questions.
Yeah, they sure did. So in this case, a patron of the show, in fact, Klaus M.A., he asks, what are some of the guardrails given to authors from GW? Do you get maps or lexicon or name directory? I think you mentioned like a lore Bible or something previously, but like what tools do they give you to write these things? And what tools did you use for this novel? I'm curious.
I always go to the battle tomes. So I go there. But the thing is like there's a funny thing about, game lore, game setting lore in that a lot of people want to read it as like a religious text when I think it should be read more as like a historical text because, you'll have these Wikipedias pointing out like, well, such and such happened at the Battle of Burning Skies. And, this person died and this person did this. And, it just keeps going. And it's sort of treated like a gospel when I think that it's more fun to treat it like a history. And it's like, this is a perspective of what happened at the Battle of Burning Skies, or this is what this person said about it. So I like to look at the battle tomes like that. And the battle tomes are just so thick with description. Like they will rattle off like 100 things in one page. And you're like, wow, I want to write stories about all those. And so I always go there. And as pertains to guardrails, one of the things we have the IP Bible, which is I just got this year. Like I'm sure there were other ones, but I guess that they just found me. I'm important enough now to have that. So I can always look through that. And that's constantly changing as well as they change the setting and as they update things. And I'm sure you well know that, things don't necessarily stay the same in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
So as far as that, and then it depends on the editor a lot with regards to guardrails, like with the Harrow Hand, the Black Talon novel, short story, I had, very strict set of characters and a very strict thing, like a tone they wanted me to hit. Whereas like with, I want to say Path to Glory, they were just like, okay, just do what you want to do. And it depends on the editor. Like you have a relationship with an editor, and some editors are micromanagers, and some editors are more loosey goosey. And I'd say it varies quite a bit, but always try and go to the texts and at least try and give them like a head nod, like, do the research. And again, I'm a historian by trade, so I love this stuff. I love getting into the weeds with regards to, the various cities of Sigmar and, the Tetrarchs of Ruin and things like that. So
kind of related to that, do you also have to know where the current storyline is sort of at a macro level, regardless of historical details, which is also obviously very important, but are you also sort of expected to keep abreast of where the story is today as well?
To a point, I suppose. It depends on where the story's set. Regards to Children of Teclis, I only needed to know up basically through the Necroquick. I didn't the Era of Beasts don't figure into it at all. Era of the Beast. So I mean, I know about it obviously, but I do like reading sort of the timeline and the Age of Sigmar stuff. So I enjoy it. I would be doing this anyway. So why not, why not keep doing it? Yeah.
I have no idea what that's like, reading everything anyway to begin with.
Paul, we didn't give you a chance to say unreliable narrator. So if you want to say it right now, go ahead.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really a big fan of the unreliable narrator when you're like, it's not the gospel truth. It's just a perspective. Yeah, no. So yes, I was literally just be like, yep.
And I was looking for a button to mute Paul so he would.
Yeah, I was being good and not jumping in.
We should record you so that I can just press a button that just says you saying unreliable narrator, and then we're like, all right, carry on, go ahead.
Yeah. So then you said that you source a lot of stuff from the battle tomes. So was the Atlantic Empire something that was in the battle tome first, or something that you came up with and then was put into the battle tome?
It was in the battle tome first, and I was surprised. I wanted something that had a little bit written about it, but not a lot, so I could really flesh it out on my own. So they were pretty great about letting me do that a bit, and then they did their own thing with it, which is fine too. I mean, they're the boss, right?
Right.
The lore comes from them, so it was a lot of fun. And I think it might have been one or two blurbs in one of the battle tomes that I ran across, and I'm like, this seems like a really cool thing. And it fit the story I wanted to tell, like the doomed empire that used to be really cool and is now falling apart, it's in its sort of Byzantium stage. So it was fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Random question that popped in my head, because you mentioned referencing the battle tomes a lot, but Black Library and Games Workshop, it's all the same lore. Do you get to have conversations with the people that write the battle tomes to see if they have any other insight into stuff like the Atlantic Empire, or do they hand you the written materials and you sort of forge ahead from there?
I get sort of mediated contact with the people at Black Library. So I'll be like, okay, well, here's what I want to write about. Here are 5 questions I have about the Atlantic Empire. Can you run this up the flagpole and see if and see if anyone has anything I should be worried about or any more information? And the editor will reach out to Black Library, the Black Library will reach back to the editor, and then they get back to me. So it's all sort of a game of telephone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sorry. So speaking of Atlantic Empire, speaking of Ulish Tai, I'm not sure how you pronounce that in your head.
Oh.
But the City of Gears, where did you come up with that concept? Because that's a super fun concept, and the way that everything moves and no place is the same except for these 2 buildings that are connected. Where did that come from?
I don't think I could claim total credit for it, because I think that it probably came out of some sort of steampunk game I was playing at the time. So, I mean, I like to say I made that up. I was just trying to make the realms weird and have cool, because, if you're going to be in Shaman, you've got to take advantage of that sort of stuff. It's a lot of fun to, have mechanical stuff and metal things and,
But so you say that you didn't make it up, but at the same time, I don't think that other authors were like, hey, we're going to take the dead bodies of our ancestors and transmute them into metal to make them into gears that actually move the city. And then we're going to need a character that is actually of the blood to actually have people escape, right? Which to me is what makes it AOS, right? It's okay, you have a cool city with gears that moves around, but then binding that into a bloodline. And I thought that was a really cool touch and made it something that screams AOS to me. So,
well, thank you. I like to think I'm responsible for that, but I don't know for sure.
You can claim whatever you want on this show. Yeah, no one's going to fact check us. So I got another question from a listener. This comes from Kelborn, and they ask if Evan, you had absolute freedom, what would you write about? Presumably, I think in the Age of Sigmar, or I guess answer it any way you want. He goes on to say a small-scaled, character-driven story, which I think you'd mentioned before, a big lore-shaking one, and what faction would you like to write about that maybe you have or haven't had a chance to write about as well?
If I had a chance to write anything I wanted, it would probably be a Cities of Sigmar story, and it would focus on, it would be probably free guild centric, and it would be sort of like a darkly textured political drama. I think one of the things I enjoy the most about writing in general is, like I said, character work, but also like the politics behind it, the the courts and the very like the Lords of Heaven Hall, sort of pushing down these edicts via Azir, and then these sort of, I don't want to call them colonial possessions, but there's these other cities that have been established there by Azerites, and there's this sort of friction between the local inhabitants who have been reclaimed, and they want to have their own systems of government, but Azir's got bigger problems to worry about, and when you've got a living godhead, there's sort of the buck stops with Sigmar, more or less. So ultimately, I'd like to sort of do a sort of free guild novel where we're focusing on the politics of the city, the various conclaves and whatnot. I think that would be really fun to write. A political drama, I guess. I don't want to say a comedy as an economy of manners, because it is still Warhammer, so we've got to throw some battles in there and some chaos.
Somebody's got to hit somebody.
Yeah.
Kind of related to that, and just Cities of Sigmar with the new book coming out, do you have like your own newly inspired City of Sigmar in mind, just by looking at all the models and all the art?
Oh man, you mean like I could make up my own City of Sigmar?
Yeah, exactly. Like based on what like do you kind of have like your own city kind of where you'd want to tell the story yet?
I think that I'd rather do it in an already established city, just so they've got some like framework to run off. I mean, obviously, like Hammerhall Akshi is just a huge city, and there's so many stories you could tell there, and it's sort of like the New York of the Sigmarite Empire. So that'd be a pretty fun way to set it. But I also there's something that to commend themselves about every. The cities of Sigmar are also cool. Like I don't really need to make up anymore. Like I can write about Greywater Fastness and like the big ghoul mirror that surrounds it, like this industrial wasteland, and sort of tie it into modern day climate change and things like that. So touch on fears of the age, specter of environmental collapse, all those fun stuff.
Yeah, all that great stuff.
Lighthearted,
some lighthearted. If Hammerhall actually is sort of like New York, does that mean Hammerhall Gyra is like New Jersey?
The Garden State.
I don't think I'm allowed to comment on that.
Sorry, Martin. That was Will's point, not mine. So, are you a reclaimed or are you an Azerite? Do you see yourself as in the Warhammer?
Oh man, I'd have to be an Azerite. I want to be one of the mean girls. Like, I want to be like just some like stiff upper lip, like I put me in a uniform with like a high-necked collar, one of those like turtlenecks, and a bunch of little medallions twinkling on my chest. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's good that you know that about yourself. I feel like everyone would feel pressured into saying reclaim just because, but no, not you and me. Yeah, we know where we come from. I get it. Right on. Speaking of, if you could write about other things, are there any other are there existing characters that you'd love to write about if you had the chance?
Ooh, I literally just finished reading all the new Slayer novels, so it'd be cool to write. Like if I don't think they would ever trust me with Gotrek, but if I could get a whack at Felix or maybe Malineth, I don't know. Yeah,
okay,
that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool to have a chance to do that. If she survived, if Malineth survived the last one, so
I haven't read enough of them to know that she might not. Oh no,
okay,
it'll be a long time before it gets one.
Sorry,
so I don't remember what I read this morning, let alone like this conversation when I finally get there. So
that does lead to a question of how much do you actually talk to other Black Library authors when you do these? Like, have you done any collaborations with sharing back and forth, or that's not really a thing?
Not yet. No, okay. Not as of yet. No. I do talk to they're on like Facebook and Twitter, so we do chat from time to time, but nothing like specifically lore related like that. No, they seem like really cool people, so obviously I want to be friends with them.
Sure. Why do you think we're doing these conversations? Me too.
The problem is a lot of them are over in Britain, and I can't get over there. I want to go to like a weekender or something, and have a few pints with these guys, but that's not in the cards for someone like me at the moment.
It's so far away. It's just an accident that we've only interviewed 2 Americans. It was not intentional. I didn't plan it that way. But a question that I didn't think I was going to ask, but this is my new brain child or whatever that I can't let go. Who of your characters would you contribute to a Age of Sigmar Black Library Avengers? Do you have a character you think would fit a super team? Because I want to see that happen.
Avengers. Okay, so like like a Black Talon sort of thing is what you're thinking of. Like,
well, I guess that's kind of, I suppose that's what they've become these days. That's a good point. Yeah. But like, I just think of some of the bigger names that have come out that like, man, especially, I mean, and this maybe leads into I'll get to the second part of the question.
Yeah, I see what you're going with the second part.
Yeah. Who do you got any characters you think would fit?
The one I've enjoyed the most is a sort of like Byron Hess from the Red Hours, the guy I mean, if he survived the Red Hours, if he wasn't just killed by Stormcast, he would have risen sort of meteorically in the ranks of the Free Guild. So he's this Free Guild general, but secretly he's like, possessed by this chaos creature. So I think that'd be a really fun like friction to have on an Avengers thing. So like on the surface, he's like, Captain America, but underneath he's, the Red Skull. So,
nice.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Good answer. Yeah. Geez. Related, similar vein, and I was going to ask this later, but I'll ask now. Which of your characters would you like to see most made into a model? I feel like they've been doing Black Libraries, GW Black Library have been doing it a little bit more than they used to. Do you have any characters that you'd like to see in physical form? Maybe the answer is the same, but
I want to say Rat Gob, the loon boss from my Shriekstone.
Yeah.
I just love those. I'll make them real weird.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Good. All right, cool. I'll stop. Keep going. Anybody else wants to ask more?
We just have another listener question from Chrisling, which is, if you were made the Grand Exalted Marshal of all lore, what changes to the setting of Age of Sigmar would you make?
Wow. That's quite a
Hypothetical.
question.
Yeah, hypotheticals. Get ready.
Huge order.
That's really quite a question.
Put humans back on lizards.
That's right. Where they belong. Lizards, mantises, all sorts of weird mounts. No horses.
Picketing outside of Hammer Hall right now.
I think that the lore has to, the models come first. That's something that the editors are always sort of keen on, is like, make sure to highlight the models, because that, we're writing fiction for a tabletop game. So, if you ignore the model, that's probably why I'm not allowed to do lizards anymore. But
the modelers can't figure out lizards. They can't do it. That's not true. The Seraphon have proven they know how to do lizards. But sorry, go ahead.
I know it's a sort of grimdark setting, and the good guys have lost. They just don't know it yet, sort of thing. But I think I'd like to. I would ease up on the pressure of chaos, the looming pressure of chaos, and give like the cities of Sigmar and the Lumineth and whatnot, like time to breathe. And by time to breathe, I mean time to get into civil wars and stuff. So I want to see I want to see Hammer Hall Akshi making a play for like leadership of the cities of Sigmar, and then, various other cities sort of taking issue with that. And then we get sort of like the interhuman politics of that. And then of course the Lumineth have to put their finger with Settlers Gain. They have to put their thumb on the scale, so to speak. So I'd like to see more sort of, one of the greatest things about Age of Sigmar, I think, from a playing perspective, is you can put all these models on the board, like you can, with all the Grand Alliances, right? So I'd like to see some more friction between the Grand Alliances and, maybe some strange bedfellows. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I always thought that like the first edition Age of Sigmar was very much order versus chaos. Second edition is very order versus death. Third edition is very order versus destruction. I always thought that the fourth edition should be an order versus order vibe. Like I feel like that's one part of the quartet that hasn't really been looked at.
And then vice versa, I'd like to see more sort of friction between the destruction and chaos factions as well. That'd be fun too.
True.
Yeah. And then they had a follow-up to that of, would you go back and make any changes to your own creations? Like if you could shape the setting, are there any characters or stories that you would reshape as well?
No, I think I've done everything perfectly. Next question.
Yes, no doubt.
Of course, I'm constantly second guessing myself.
Right.
The problem is I second guess myself so much that if I went back and changed it, I would be afraid I'd make it even worse.
Yeah, when would you stop?
Yeah.
That's true.
Makes me wonder, when you're talking about all this political intrigue, what is your Bright Spear like in Soulbound? Because it sounds like it's going to be super political and super involved with everything else, and the floating market, Batar, and everything. Is that where most of your adventures are based in, or do you kind of like do far-flung adventures more to the point?
I think that it would be almost exactly what you described. It would be more political and sort of stuck in the city. Mm-hmm. I think I have the most fun when you're like negotiating, like in a game of diplomacy or something. Mm-hmm. I like to do that sort of stuff. And again, I think that if I can touch back on like the way that I play RPGs, is like 99% of the game is us talking to each other, and then maybe we'll roll dice twice in a session when we need to resolve something that we can't resolve like through impromptu acting or creating characters or telling stories and whatnot. So I think that I really like the idea of something set in sort of a political spectrum, and then the actual battles and stuff being peripheral to that. But I mean, we want to focus on those too. But whether a bureaucrat manages to get 200 extra swords to a free guild regiment might make the difference between life and death. So I think that's sort of, and that can be, I think that those things can be just as compelling. All the sort of hoops that this guy or a girl has to jump through to get these swords out to the people who need them, to fight the good fight. I think that will be a lot of fun.
So you mentioned, to my ear, you mentioned the game Diplomacy.
Yeah.
Have you actually played Diplomacy? Have you played Twilight Struggle? Have you played
not in a long time?
No.
It ended some friendships.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I sort of got burned by it back in the day.
Yeah.
You still got the knife wound in your back from it.
Man. I trusted you, Ben. I trusted you.
Ben's been new enemy. Yeah.
I have a friend who keeps on trying to pitch us playing Diplomacy, and I'm just like, are you unhappy with us? Like, what's wrong? Like, why do you want to cut this friendship off? Like,
I want to break up. Yeah. All right, we got a series of more listener questions. I want to make sure we get to them while we still have time. So I'm going to ask some more if you guys are cool. Try and stop me. Can't do it. I'm in charge. It's not true. So another question from SageMut14. He asked a bunch of questions, but we got a couple ones. First and foremost, he's been talking about princes a lot, and I know he wants to get this one answered. Lumineth have nobility with titles such as prince existing. What is a prince in this context? When I talk about specific ones, this is one of those specific ones I was mentioning before.
I honestly couldn't tell you, man. I used prince sort of as a political title, sort of that meaning like the ranking noble in a city or whatnot, because I've got a couple. I've got Sheriel, the Lord Regent, she's a princess, and then I've got a Prince Senereth. So I'm thinking that they're sort of, it's sort of in a Prussian sense, it's sort of indistinguishable from like a military rank. Like you're sort of responsible. You're in the city. You're sort of a governor / war marshal for that particular city, or I don't want to say geo segment, but like that sort of area or province or whatnot. Yeah. And that's how I see them. I imagine there's some sort of court as well that they sort of preside over. So I guess a ranking noble in a city. And what gets you the title? I don't know, probably birth, accident of birth, just like in the real world.
Yeah, true. I should have warned you. The next 5 questions are all about elves. These people love elves. That's what they want to find out more about. So get ready. I guess it makes sense, I guess. Question from Martin. I don't know if he has a different name in our Discord. I just know him as Martin. But he asks, long one, here we go. Elves are relatively ubiquitous across fantasy and even science fiction. Rare is the opportunity to write a book whose ensemble cast consists predominantly of elves. I don't know if that's true, but okay. What is it like to write an elf in the worlds of Warhammer contrasted against, say, Lord of the Rings or Star Trek's Vulcans? So I think he's probably asking what's unique about an Age of Sigmar elf and writing about him.
That's a question that I had to grapple with. So he really hit that on the head, because, it's really tempting to make them sort of, because the way they're written in Age of Sigmar, they're very sort of, and they could see themselves as enlightened and sort of, beings of logic and knowledge. So it's sort of tempting to fall into those tropes like the perfection of elves in the Lord of the Rings, where, they're just too beautiful to be around in this world anymore. We need to, or a Vulcan, for instance, where you're bound by logic, but then you've got this sort of core of rage inside of you. So I tried to make them fundamentally. Here's the thing too: is you have to make them like comprehensible to people. Yeah. So I think that like you can sort of focus on their sins, so that they're sort of prideful, and at least the Lumineth. Well, that was one of the fun things about Children of Technos, is I got to sort of focus on the pride and sort of the arrogance of elves, but through 2 different lenses. Yeah. Like both the Illumineth and the Ideneth are prideful in their way. Yeah. And both of them are very, very, smart in their way, and both of them are, sort of playing 3-dimensional chess with each other in their way. So I think that's sort of, I tried to focus on that and, make them believable and interesting characters. And God, I really hope I succeeded.
Yeah, I think you did succeed. I just only finished reading it, but I didn't say any more questions because I was like, no, we've got to move on. But yeah, no, I would definitely say you succeeded. So
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
You're 3 different stages. Paul's read it. Will started. I haven't started. I'm getting there. As soon as I finish the other Van Wyn book, I'm right on next to my list. I should mention also, Frosted Celt had a very similar question, which is what he asked, what's your favorite aspect of elves in AOS, and how do they feel different from elves in other worlds? So I don't want to think that I didn't see your question. I did. Don't worry. I don't know. Maybe you have a way to expand on what your favorite aspect of the elves are. Maybe that was your answer, or maybe there's more to it than that.
Hubris is my favorite. Aspect of the elves. I love that they're going in, and especially as an American, I can really empathize with like going somewhere, trying to, believing you're making stuff better. Like just like we need to get this guy out of here. We need to, rebuild the society. We need to do this, for the people. And then realizing like halfway through, like, oh, they don't want us here. They don't like what we're doing. Like we're kind of in a mess here. Oh, geez. Like I think that I identify and enjoy the hubris of the elves.
And like to that point, in Children of Teclis, we do meet like an Illumineth War Council, and you can pinpoint how each member of that council has their own different type of hubris that sets them apart from each other, but is still like distinctly elven. And so just like kudos to managing like that on top of different factions of elves.
Well, thank you. I love characters.
They had a follow-up question is this also, who's cooler, Lumineth or Ideneth? And then they say, and why is it Ideneth? But I won't color your opinion. You get to pick who's cooler, Lumineth or Ideneth.
Oh, man, like now at this moment in my life, I'm going to say Lumineth. But if you'd asked me like even 5 years ago, I would have said Ideneth. Like I was a goth in high school. Like I get it, guys. I get it. What it's like to feel like you don't belong and your parents don't understand you. I get it. Like. And I also get it what it's like to be an overachiever and like, incredibly nervous and, have panic attacks when you're not making daddy happy, daddy techniques, so I get it. I get them both. And man, so I'd have to say Illumineth at the moment, but, Ideneth, they're delightful in their own way.
Sure. Actually, I'm going to ask the rest of the group too. I know it's your interview, but I'm just curious. Just one word answer. Paul, Illumineth or Ideneth, who's cooler?
Well, Lumineth could conceivably ride lizards, but also Ideneth could conceivably ride lizards that swim underwater, and that's cooler. Yeah. So Ideneth.
Weird way to count to one. Will, Lumineth or Ideneth?
I mean, fish elves are super cool, but also I was a teen in 0908, so I definitely vibe with the emo elves. It's also why my intro pun was an Evanescence pun.
You people are the worst. The answer is Ideneth.
You
see how you do that?
One word answer.
You answer one word. No, my answer was one word. Anyways, let's keep going. Sagemut had another question. Let's ask it. Is Uliashtai from your earlier stories? Is that a city of Sigmar?
I would say it's probably a ruin now. I would love it to be a city of Sigmar. So yeah, I guess. Ideally, yes, but probably it was destroyed with the Atlantic Empire and it's probably grinding away underground somewhere. Maybe some dispossessed found it or something and are nursing it back to life, or some fire slayers down there. Who knows? If I ever have a chance to revisit it.
I will clarify this question with Sagemut helps with the lexicon and all that kind of stuff, right? So he's trying to say, is this a Cities of Sigmar? Can I put this under the City of Sigmar tag when I'm describing the lore?
Absolutely. Right. There are people there, human people. Yes.
Done.
Perfect. I will go up to a patron question from Ash, which is, if you were to describe the different types of elves as food dishes, what dishes and why?
So I think the Ideneth would be sort of a like mall court sushi that you eat out front of a hot topic while you're waiting for your friends to show up. Yeah. You're just sort of skulking in a corner in your all black Cure t-shirt, enjoying some mall sushi. And then the Ideneth would probably be, the Lumineth would be one of those like tapas, like one of those tiny plates that you have to pay the full price for, but it's like half a meal. Yeah, the Lumineth would be a single, like toasted brioche with some sort of probably gold foil on it and a little bit of like steak tartare.
Yes, I do have a follow-up question for lore, which is, had you just gone to Florida right before you wrote The Low Road, where you were talking about the dryads that lived in the Wargrove that was set from mangroves?
No, but my mom does winter down in Florida. She's sort of one of those snowbirds. So I have been to Florida, not recently, but I'm a northern boy. I like the cold. I like the dry. And so it's always miserable to go to Florida for me. So I just I was channeling that like a visit to my mom.
I definitely got that. Like you felt the character felt miserable the entire time. It's just like, oh, the water is terrible. The humidity is oppressive. So no, that's cool. All right.
All right, I'm not going to ask all these questions. I'll tell you what, at the end, we'll get some contact information and he can reach out for some specifics. But here's exactly. What currency did Illumineth use since the Venari are temporary soldiers on contract? Are they being paid?
I don't know, man.
I'll keep going.
Right.
This is a frustrating thing because I can't use money anymore. Like in the earlier like stories, I could have like gold coins and stuff, but money has no value. So it's all Aquagranus now. So like, what do you do? Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I can't. It's all barter. So you've hit on a frustration for me as well. I think I'm really hoping in like future editions they go back to some sort of coinage, maybe it's Realmstone coin or something like that, where we can have some sort of fungible asset.
Okay, I'm glad I asked. That was a good answer too.
Yeah.
So since we're kind of in the Children of Teclis range now with these kind of questions, what would be your like 5-second pitch for why people should read Children of Teclis? What would they learn that they wouldn't learn from something else?
What they learn? How fun it is to watch Lumineth and Ideneth argue. Like, I think that putting siblings at loggerheads is a lot of fun. You said 5 seconds, so I'm going to stop myself.
Okay. All right, I think we're probably at the point where I'll ask you guys if you have any more questions that you want to ask before maybe we make up an outro that we don't really have. But go ahead.
I'm pretty good.
Is that it? Oh, all right. So I'll just start the outro. I'll ask: Is there anything that's next for you that you can talk about? Any other things that we should keep an eye out for out there? And the answer can be no, but I'll ask.
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet, but I just turned in a second draft for a novel, and they finally let me write about dirty humans. So
nice.
So it's going to be about people. I keep calling them people, but like
they would take offense to it. Yeah.
It's going to be about us folk, us humans.
Finally, jeez.
Yeah.
And so, I think I'm going to write a tie-in story for that. And then we've got I'm just pitching another novel in the wings. So hopefully I'll have a couple novels, in, a backlog. And ideally, if this does even decently, they'll ask me to write more. Every time, I'm always surprised when they ask me. I think, okay, well, this is the last time they're going to talk to me. And I'm just never going to hear from them again. And
that was it.
They keep emailing me. So I must be doing something right.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the money out of you.
Sure. This is the time we're going to shake them. Yeah.
You can never paint that Chaos Warband. Otherwise, they're going to stop emailing. That's the rule.
That's the trick. Well, in that case, Evan, I'll ask you if there's anything that you want to say or ask or bring up or get into.
Ooh, geez. I mean, not particularly. No. I wanted to thank you guys for having me on. Like, this has been just an absolute pleasure. And I want to say that I often go to you guys for lore.
I wouldn't, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Like I said, it's a history, right? So it's just yours is no or less valid than the people on Reddit who are talking about the same thing. So I and because I have a lot of time to listen to stuff, my job doesn't require me to, I'm typing away, but I don't have to, it's all Excel spreadsheets and whatnot. So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and yours is one that I go to quite frequently. You and 2+ Tough on YouTube. So I listen to you.
Nice. Very cool. Dougie Fresh. All right. Well, then I'll then say, is there anywhere online that people can find you if you want to be found at all? And maybe you don't. That's cool too.
I am on Facebook, but and I was on Twitter, but I kind of got off Twitter.
Like a lot of people.
Yeah. So I'm looking for a new social media home for myself, but I've got a website, evandicken.com. You can go to it. I update it maybe twice a year, but you can find me through. You can email me through that. So
nice.
If you want to yell at me.
Sure. Well, I would have
not wrong.
I would have done that instead of going through Michael. I should have just gone straight to the website. I didn't do that. All right, cool. Any other final thoughts from everybody before I jump into it?
No, it's been a pleasure having you.
Well, yes, thank you. This has been really awesome.
I echo that completely. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a delight, and I mean it. All right, let's do it. It's time for our reforging, but Sigmar willing, we'll be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord, drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter, at The Mortal Realms. Paul, where can they find you online?
At PJ Shard.
Well, Will, where can they find you?
At Age of Sever.
I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dosesos on Twitter, and you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. The end. Hey, thank you so much. That was a delight.
Yeah.
That was so well.
little nervous. I felt like I needed to study because you guys are all lore masters, and I'm just
Not at all. That's not true. And I was flipping nervous going into this. I'm used to talking to these chuckleheads. It's whenever somebody new throws.
I was literally spending the whole
I
time.
did like 2 or 3 hours of research beforehand, like writing down some notes about I just borrow my books and stuff. You write these things, and then sometimes later on you forget about them. And you guys are going to ask me specific questions about the first short story I ever wrote. I'm like, oh, geez.
Yeah, I had to stop myself from asking so many questions about Children of Teclis, but I definitely really enjoyed it. Trying to not put in spoilers and stuff. So I love the setting, and like immediately when you were like, oh, we're at the Dwindlesea, I'm like, okay, like this is not going to be a story that I expect. So I thought that the setting of Shyish was really good for both the Ideneth and the Lumineth pairing off against each other. Yeah. And the OC bad person was fantastic and evil with like having only 5 pages or 5 lines in the whole book.
It was originally I originally had a third like POV character, and she was going to be he was going to be a Soulblight vampire who was like living in Marrowscar that they both had to deal with. And so I had like that whole, I probably have like 6 or 7 chapters written from their perspective.
Oh, wow.
I cut out and replaced with Ossiarch because it was just too much. It was just too much. Yeah. Like, so.
Perfect.
Neat. That really recontextualized all his other questions, and now I'm regretting not including them because like he's actually doing homework right now. Okay.
Yes.
Like I said, he wanted an official response.
Spreadsheet.
Oh no! So I'll ask. Do you guys have any other questions? Maybe I'll go find his other ones real quick and bring them up if they're pertinent. Keep asking while I look.
Yeah, I will go.
Why do characters act like the Akkalian Thrallmaster is a noble rather than a military officer? I don't. Maybe we can stop here. I don't know.
That's fair. He was at one point a noble, I think, as a prince. And I think that without giving too much away, like the destruction of their enclave has sort of thrown everything into flux, basically. So you've got these Ishuran, and he's the only thing like even close to an Akkalian, right? Even close to a noble. Granted, he isn't one anymore, but they have to sort of treat him like the one and put him on the council. And also he commands the loyalty of most of the Namarti because he's I didn't really put it in the book, but like most of the Namarti working for them are like his Reaver crews, because my intention was like, the real reason why there's so many Namarti there is because they weren't necessarily at the destruction of the enclave. He was out collecting souls, filling buckets.
You're giving better answers than I would have expected. I appreciate that. And let me just ask one more while we're on this train real quick. So he wants to know what language are they supposed to be speaking in the book, given that the Namarti seems like are using a different language. What is everybody else speaking?
Just probably Elven. I wanted to put another barrier between the Lumineth and the Namarti, so that they didn't really talk directly to the Lumineth characters, and sort of the full-souled Ideneth, the true-souled Ideneth, had to act as interpreters for the Namarti. And I think that granted, like every enclave is different, but I think that like the way that the Ideneth society is structured, at least the one in Shyish, the Eichmar one, I could see them having a language specifically for the Namarti to isolate them from the outside world and that sort of stuff. So the nobles have to act as a mediating factor. Like you can't even talk to a person. Like a Namarti can't even talk to somebody like a human or a Dwarden or something like that. So I thought I tried to put that sort of roadblock in there because I think that Alarin as a character would want to like, oh, hey, I had a rough upbringing too. And, I want to talk to you and like connect with you on a personal level, but to make that difficult for her. So she has to go through these people who don't like her to begin with to talk to Namarti.